as possible to explain that, because obviously that will have a big impact on commuters, many of whom, of course, had already gone in, perhaps using Metro, and how they're going to get home this afternoon. But apparently Metro is also responding to this by shutting down.
Professor Viana, with regard to the Middle East, there seemed to be a great deal of anger in the Palestinian community over Israel's use of American equipment for this very controversial policy of assassinating, targeting directly and personally Palestinian leaders, where they would use these Apache helicopters that could essentially stand off the targets, and then they would fire guided missiles into a vehicle. Is that
or into
type,
a building? We
or
saw
into
one
a building,
recently into a building,
and
right.
one actually into a car recently. Is this the type of policy that they have felt that would generate this type of anger that could lead to this type of thing? And as we point out, there is no indication at this point of any particular group's responsibility for these attacks.
Well, that certainly is one of the elements. I wouldn't say that it is the determinant reason why all of this is taking place, but certainly I think that the support that the U.S. is giving to Israel, both in politically and economically and militarily, is at the roots of most probably of what is happening here. But I wouldn't just limit it to the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I think that there is the whole issue of the sanctions against Iraq. There is still the whole issue of Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, and other areas where conflict between the U.S. and the Western world and Islam is festering. So I think that it will take some very bold steps and deep engagement on the part of the Bush administration. The tendency, obviously, is to be vindictive, to take revenge, to become even harsher. There are already television talk shows saying that we have to give Israel the green light to go in the Palestinian territory and do whatever they want. I think that that would be, of course, a serious mistake. I think that what we have to do is to work for an equitable solution that takes into account the interest of different parties here, and also maybe be more innovative in how we deal with these, situations that are festering, that are difficult, that are complicated. But
Professor, once again, let me jump in as we ponder the bigger questions here. We do also want to keep people up to date on the local response. D.C. police now saying all available should report. All available should report.
And we also have some clarification now on what may have happened at the Pentagon. According to the Associated Press, an aircraft seen diving in towards the Pentagon apparently crashed on the helicopter landing pad near the Pentagon. You'll see these pads when you are on 395 and so forth. You can see them, so perhaps it missed the building directly. We don't know if that's the case, but the initial report now is it crashed on a helicopter landing pad near the Pentagon. We also have some other things to talk about in terms of close downs. As we pointed out, there is no air travel in the United States, commercial air travel at this time.
Right, so this is a massive response across the United States. Let's try to just bring you up to date on some of the things that are happening that will affect your life today. Air takeoffs across this country have been suspended. Metro is suspending train service. D.C. police calling in all officers today. So the city, the nation's capital, is mobilizing against this attack. And very soon we're going to join our Audrey Barnes on the phone. Is Audrey going near the Pentagon?
I believe Audrey is there now. Audrey, what can you tell us?
Michael, I'm on the grounds right across from the Pentagon, and what I can tell you is it is still on fire. There is black smoke just billowing throughout the Pentagon grounds. There are several hundred employees on the grounds. They are crying, hugging each other. I see about 15 different pieces of fire apparatus. I see ladders. It's just a scene of utter chaos out here. Traffic is still getting by in front of the Pentagon, but most of this roadway has been shut down.
Audrey, let me interrupt you to explain what people are seeing, because I'm not sure if you can see the picture. We do have a picture now where we can see some people, and we can also see the flames and the smoke that you're talking about and some of the emergency equipment. This is the first time we have seen that. So please go on, Audrey, from your vantage point with what you are seeing. But we can now see flames. We see emergency crews, and just a moment ago we also did see some people there. So, Audrey, go right ahead.
Audrey Barnes, are you still with us? We'll try to recover.
We've lost that in a moment. If we can, I'm not sure. Did we control this camera? If we could get them to pan back to the left here, let's try to see what detail that we can. Apparently, we lost that picture as well. It's a camera that we don't control, but it's showing you there are active flames at the Pentagon, and you can see, obviously, some of the workers there watching this incredible scene unfold there at the Pentagon. We'll try to get you a number on exactly how many people do currently work in that building. but it is a major complex there in Virginia.
And the two things that we have been reporting so far is a radio reporter from the Associated Press saying he saw what he quoted as a large airliner diving directly for this building, and also a report from the Associated Press, which would be fortunate if it were the case, that it may have hit the helicopter landing pad outside the building instead of going inside this building, which is made up, as you know, at one time perhaps still is the world's largest office building by space, going inside the rings itself.
Okay,
I believe this is a picture
back
of New York
now
City.
to New York City, and it appears that something else has occurred. We're not quite sure what, but apparently the level of the smoke, is it a slightly different area from the World Trade Center? Okay, it's now the base of the World Trade Center. There seems to be now a second area there of smoke. So perhaps indicating that some sort of explosion or fire there. Now, of course, what may have happened, of course, with the all these systems compromised in the building, you may be getting an explosion from that. We do not know what has happened, but obviously something has happened there near the base of the building, setting off another round of major smoke and apparently a fire. But we don't know whether, again, it's because the building, because the earlier damage.
Okay.
The tower has collapsed.
Yeah.
The tower
this,
collapsed.
and it looks like we're seeing...
the tower collapsed.
Yeah. Unfortunately, one of the worst fears that might have happened has come to pass. One of those towers, 110 stories, has apparently collapsed. We can only hope that the area around it was evacuated as might possibly have been in the time. We're going to try and get some more information on that. So this is a major update on this terrible day of developments. One of the two World Tower Centers, well, okay, now we're finding out that that may not have happened.
All right, well, now, or Associated Press is reporting that an explosion has hit another building near the World Trade Center. So, folks, obviously we're going to try to sort this out. This is a developing situation, but AP is reporting that an explosion has hit another building near the World Trade Center to explain this round of white smoke there you see billowing up from the bottom. As the professor was saying, this is well planned, this is concerted, this is major, this is an escalation, this is a different technique.
And all this happening now, it would appear in the last hour and say 10 minutes or so, 18 minutes between the two impacts of the two World Trade Centers, and then, of course, we had the impact at the Pentagon. I believe that would have come, what, 45 and 50 minutes after that, somewhere around that time. Still waiting for casualty figures from all these places. The response here in Washington and in New York City has been fairly complete. Air traffic grounded in the United States. White House West Wing evacuated, U.S. Capitol evacuated, Metro, I believe, shutting down as well.
The State Department...
and Treasury also being evacuated at this point.
It certainly would not be surprising if they decide to go ahead and send the federal workers home. We'll wait and see what we have to say about that. Let's see if we can get someone on the line from OPM or perhaps from the district's emergency management agency, what decisions they're going to make about what to do here. Keep in mind the D.C. Council, for example, just recently moved back into that Wilson building there on the heart of Pennsylvania Avenue, where the city leaders will also evacuate. So.
And on a much smaller scale, as you remember, we've had debate recently about reopening Pennsylvania Avenue and the concerns there, which was closed after the Oklahoma City bombing attack. Many people thought that perhaps was the time now to open it back up, and after this day, perhaps the debate will be changing on that. We are awaiting the latest updates on the situation with things happening almost too fast and furious for us to report.
I do want to mention that we now have a report out of Chicago that the Sears Tower is being evacuated. Now, keep in mind, at one point, this was the world's tallest building. It is still one of the world's tallest buildings. So word now that they are evacuating, perhaps just as a precaution. Has there been any particular threat against the Sears Tower that we're aware of that is being evacuated, perhaps just as a precaution?
You're looking at the scene there. On the right-hand side, there are some new developments in New York City. We do believe that there was another blast after the two that rocked the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center towers. We are trying to determine now if this was a consequence of one of those two earlier attacks, or perhaps this was a separate explosion.
Or it was a separate explosion.
Right. We do believe
that's what we're trying to sort out. But it's beginning to appear that there was a separate explosion, but again, that cannot be sorted out at this moment.
And all these attacks apparently precipitated by the hijacking of commercial aircraft. And in one case, a 767 from, on a flight from Boston to Los Angeles. We do not have any sort of specifics on the plane that may have hit the Pentagon, or as to the first plane, the second plane rather, that hit the World Trade Center. But this in itself would be a very dramatic development. Aircraft hijackings in the United States is not something that has happened in recent time, at least in terms of large commercial aircraft.
course, we do have Audrey Barnes back now on the phone. She has a view of the Pentagon. So, Audrey, there she is now. So, Audrey, tell us where you are and what you can see.
Okay, if you look over my shoulder, you can see the Pentagon is still on fire right now. I'm right beside it. You can see hundreds of Pentagon employees have been evacuated from that building, and it is still burning right now. Most of the fire, you can see the flames shooting up behind that little guard shack there. There are hundreds of people on the lawn, and every 5 seconds another emergency vehicle goes by to try to get this fire under control. We have seen employees trying to console each other. People are walking around in absolute shock and disbelief. Now, we were at the State Department right when this happened. We saw State Department police running out of the building, telling everybody, get away. And I look up and see this
assassinating, targeting directly and personally Palestinian leaders, where they would use these Apache helicopters that could essentially stand off the targets, and then they would fire guided missiles into a vehicle. Is that
or into
type,
a building? We
or
saw
into
one
a building,
recently into a building,
and
right.
one actually into a car recently. Is this the type of policy that they have felt that would generate this type of anger that could lead to this type of thing? And as we point out, there is no indication at this point of any particular group's responsibility for these attacks.
Well, that certainly is one of the elements. I wouldn't say that it is the determinant reason why all of this is taking place, but certainly I think that the support that the U.S. is giving to Israel, both in politically and economically and militarily, is at the roots of most probably of what is happening here. But I wouldn't just limit it to the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I think that there is the whole issue of the sanctions against Iraq. There is still the whole issue of Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, and other areas where conflict between the U.S. and the Western world and Islam is festering. So I think that it will take some very bold steps and deep engagement on the part of the Bush administration. The tendency, obviously, is to be vindictive, to take revenge, to become even harsher. There are already television talks.
It's possible to explain that, because obviously that will have a big impact on commuters, many of whom, of course, had already gone in, perhaps using Metro, and how they're going to get home this afternoon. But apparently Metro is also responding to this by shutting down.
Professor Viana, with regard to the Middle East, there seemed to be a great deal of anger in the Palestinian community over Israel's use of American equipment for this very controversial policy of